Welcome back to The Other Side. We're looking at visitations and miracles. Undoubtedly, you've heard of Lourdes, France. Over the centuries, many people have reported that the waters at a grotto there have miraculous healing powers. Joining us now are Lorraine Echeverria, who took her daughter to be cured at Lourdes. Thank you for joining us, Mrs. Echeverria. Your daughter became very, very ill. Tell us about that.
Yes. When she was a freshman in high school, she became very ill with the virus. And we had to hospitalize her because it was getting to the point where no one knew how to treat this virus. And several tests were taken, and the condition just worsened to the point where they said I'd have to put her into a diagnostic hospital. It would take 3 months. And in the meantime, lots of prayers were offered, and we decided to take her to Lourdes instead.
You don't do something like that without feeling like your other options are just exhausted. So
that's right.
And it was not easy to do, was it, to get to Lourdes?
She was extremely ill on the trip. Matter of fact, at one point in Paris, I thought I might lose her, and it was very difficult. Even to this day, it's hard for me to talk about it, because she begged me not to put her on another airplane because she was so ill, and she got headaches from the airplane. And I had no choice. I had to put her on another plane. But the results after we got to Lourdes was the healing.
You actually even took out a loan to...
Yes, we didn't have the funding.
Lorraine, you were very sick. Did you think you were going to die?
Yes, I did. I had actually looked forward to it because I was very, very tired of the pain and the suffering, and I just hurt constantly, and I looked at it as a welcome relief.
What happened when you got to Lourdes?
We got there and we were ahead of time before we could actually go into the bathing, so I had laid down in one of the infirmary beds, and all of a sudden I was outside of my body, and I was walking on the actual grounds themselves, and I was with a beautiful lady who was walking next to me, and we were communicating, but our lips weren't moving, and she said, "You have to go back now." And I said, I don't want to go back, that body's dying. And she said, "Yes, but you must go back to prove to others that he still exists today." And I put my head down, and the next thing you know, I was back in my body.
What do you think happened to you? Was that a near-death experience?
I don't know. I guess at that point I knew I was going to be okay, and I knew that everything that we had gone through was just going to work out for me. And it took me a long time to share that experience with people because it's still very, very special to me.
Who was the lady?
I don't know. I never saw her face. She was just in a beautiful, beautiful long robe, peace and beauty, and just blessings was just all around her. But
it was not the Blessed Mother who is the source of the healing at Lourdes, right? It was
I
not
have no
her.
idea who it was, no.
Do you remember going into the healing waters? Describe that.
The workers were really apprehensive about helping me because I really looked bad at that point. And thank God they did, and we went through the waters, and I didn't feel anything special. We got dressed, and you don't have to dry off or towel off because that's part of the miraculous waters is you just get dressed and there's no water spots. And I was really tired at that point. We got back into the wheelchair and got all bundled up and got back to the hotel. And I got extremely, extremely tired, and I just wanted to lay down. I told my mother, don't even change me, nothing, just take off my belt, take off my shoes, and just let me sleep. And I slept for about 5 hours.
And it was a very deep sleep, right? You've described it as a real, you were out.
My grandmother was sharing the room with me, and she said she made all kinds of noise and banged in the bed and knocked suitcases, did everything, and I never stirred until it was time to wake up.
And when she woke up, what happened?
She had a glow in her face, and she had rosy cheeks, and her eyes were beautiful. They looked like they would dance out of her head, and you knew that the power of God had touched her. There was no question.
What did it feel like to you to wake up?
I remember walking over to the mirror, just being able to walk with no pain, and I looked at myself, and it was me again. I was whole. I couldn't believe it. I thought, oh my God, thank you, sweet Jesus, I'm me.
What did the doctors say about this experience?
Well, by the time we got back, it was time to go to this medical center that we were supposed to go, and the doctor ran some tests, and his response was, what was there is no longer there. It's gone. A lot of people just were at a loss for words.
You're convinced it was a miracle?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Did you believe in miracles before? You were a young girl, but
I believed in, my faith was in my mother, and her faith was in Our Lady.
Does the church approve of pilgrimages to Lourdes?
We just took a group in August that was, which a priest, a very friend of our family, went with us, for sure.
But that's not true of every site where there have been claims about healing, right?
No.
Right.
The church investigates
Right.
this?
Correct.
Actually, Lourdes, I think, was approved within a very short period of time, which is very unusual.
Yeah.
Did they ever know what you had? Did the doctors know what virus you had or anything?
No.
No, not to actually give a medical term name to it, no.
It was never clarified, never diagnosed
No.
formally what
I
ailed
couldn't
you.
find it.
You mentioned that you've gone again to Lourdes with other people, with other members of your church, and I think, has anybody else been cured?
Yes.
People in your, who you've gone with.
We went with 31 people this year, and there were a lot of pain that they had suffered, and yes, there had been healings.
I work as a volunteer now at Lourdes, and I've been there 13 times, and there are many, many undocumented miracles and cures of Lourdes.
But have there been cases of more dramatically documented reversals of illnesses? Do you know what I'm talking about?
They have pictures there. When you're on the ground, you can go in and you can look at all the healings that they have documented.
Next, we'll meet a woman who claims she has actually seen the Virgin Mary. Stay with us. By the Virgin Mary and Abbot Benedict McDermott, who chronicles the events at Conyers, Georgia. You were a reporter for NBC, which is a pretty hard-bitten profession, and now you've become a healer. What led you to Conyers, Georgia?
Actually, I had no intention, of going to Conyers, Georgia. I had been to Medjugorje, Yugoslavia, and I was the first lay person to write about Medjugorje. The book was Be a Light. And I thought I had seen everything I'd ever wanted to see in Medjugorje. My rosary beads had turned gold. I had pink lights in my beads. And I'd heard the voice of the Virgin. So I came back to spread that word and those messages of love and of peace. And then several friends, several people from many, many places in different states called me and they said, you have to go to Conyers. I kept saying, why do I need to go? They said, Anne-Marie, go and see for yourself. And you're right. I was a reporter. I used to substitute on NBC and do the Hollywood interviews for NBC. And I went as a skeptic, thinking, here is melodrama at its best. And I was wrong.
Abbot McDermott, what have you witnessed at Conyers?
I've seen Our Lady, and I've seen our Lord, and also Padre Pio, who's a favorite of the people of Conyers. And we have prayed over people who have been healed. And it's really interesting. One case was just a little boy that Anne-Marie prayed over and was healed of multiple strokes. And the next day she saw him at a Shoney's blowing up a balloon.
Jesus is so awesome in his love, in his mercy, and his wisdom. And I think the fact that he chose me is a commentary on a very ordinary person. There's nothing extraordinary about me.
Abbot, how does the church respond to what's happening in Conyers?
Well, we have talked with the Archbishop of Atlanta. When we were talking with the Archbishop, he said, I see the fruits of the work there at Conyers, and that people have been healed, that they've had conversions, and they've, going back to church and that. And so he just really hasn't done anything.
And the healing, the documented healing of physical ailments is really what is so persuasive about this for so many people, isn't it?
Okay, yes, it is. We have two cases that I can think of. One is Pat Luth. She's from Lynchburg, and she has 3 daughters who are doctors. And she had hepatitis C. And one day she came up to Anne-Marie to be prayed over. When she went back to the medical college in Charlottesville, Virginia, they couldn't find a bit of trace of the hepatitis C. The next occasion was a psychologist called Robin Hickey. She's 30, 32, 33 now, and she had multiple MS plus also CP. And what happened to her, and one arm was shorter than the other, and one leg was shorter than the other. Her mother came over to Anne-Marie's house to ask her to pray over her. And what happened, Anne-Marie laid hands on her, and the next day they got a call from the doctor's office, and both hands were the same size. A couple weeks later, came back to Emory and prayed over again, and then both legs were at the same size. The first time she could walk.
Talk about the experience of actually seeing the Blessed Mother. What's that like?
Well, I was in the apparition room in Georgia, and she appeared sort of, I think it was Our Lady of Medjugorje. She's dressed in sort of like a gray gown, and about life size. Didn't say anything, but my eyes are wide awake, and I'm saying, am I really seeing what I'm seeing? And so that just blew my mind.
I would never interrupt the abbot. He's my spiritual director, and I'm supposed to be very obedient. But I'm going to do something that's probably very unfair, but I think it's important. The abbot is very, very shy, as you can see, and he's very, very humble. Visionaries have seen him transfigured in light. I saw him transfigured in light in Britannia. Nancy Fowler from Conyers has seen him in light. And every time he moved, the light moved with him. Father Luby in Washington, who's nationally known also for the healing, said that he has seen the abbot with saints and angels. I'm really sorry, Abbot.
You know,
I know I should have done that. But it's his humility and his love that make him so beautiful. He's not someone to talk about himself ever. And this is very hard for him to do this.
Tell us about the photo of the Blessed Virgin.
The one that you're looking at, maybe now on camera, of the Virgin, is very special because this one has been studied and was given to the Archbishop of Atlanta. And there are 14 witnesses present. It was an Instamatic, a Polaroid that came out immediately. The people that saw it, the documentation is with me, were all from different faiths and from different states. And this
but you're constantly, obviously, it is a faith issue, isn't it? Because you're constantly bombarded with people who question that.
Would you say that people who are exercising their faith, who don't get healed, what do you say to them when they believe that they should be getting healed, but perhaps they don't?
I believe there is only one divine physician. You know, I say I am a conduit, an electric wire for Jesus. My body gets like hot iron, but that's all I am is a conduit. Jesus is the divine physician.
And so that's what the person who doesn't get healed ultimately has to find their questions in their own faith.
I have to say, how do we know if they are or they aren't? Which is
well, you know, hey, I'll tell you how you know. If you go there and you have cancer and you walk away and you die a month later, you weren't healed. That's how people are going to interpret that.
How about if you didn't have faith and you walked away with some faith?
Is
that a healing? Yes, I think it is.
Picky. But that's the point. Isn't that the point? I mean, we have had this discussion on this show before. In this country, in this culture, we're so obsessed with the cure of the illness, as opposed to being healed, that people go.
No faith.
People go and demand or want curing, and perhaps what's being offered here is healing always and curing sometimes. Would that be fair to say, Abbott?
Well, it would be inner healing, and that's one thing the Archbishop talks about. He says he's looks more to the spiritual healing, that people have come back to church or something has really happened inside and they've come alive with their Lord Jesus.
What would you say in terms of physical curing? What's the track record? 20%, 10%?
Well, I never count the numbers.
What about spiritual healing? Is that a higher percent, would you say?
I think so. The height would be.
Welcome back. We're discussing miracles and visions. Joining us is Mary Gibril and her son Patrick. Mary claims to have been cured by a miracle. Mary, you were a very sick lady. You had real problems. What happened to you?
I had a heart attack about 3.5 years ago.
A serious one?
Uh-huh.
Almost killed you?
Yeah.
How ill was your mom, Patrick?
Well, she not only had a heart attack, she had congestive heart failure. She had blood clots, and they ultimately found that she had nodules growing in her lungs, and she had a previous history of cancer, and they were sure that it was cancer, but they couldn't do a biopsy because the procedure might kill her. And it worked to the point that the doctor told us that she didn't have very much longer to live, and that he thought that she'd been in the hospital long enough to take her home, let her rest, and see what happens.
You went to a healing service at your church, didn't you?
At my church.
Tell us about that.
I had a CAT scan like today, and I went to the healing service like tomorrow. And after I got her at the chair, Father Benedict and Anne Marie prayed over me. And when I got up at the chair, I just felt a funny feeling all over me. And my daughter was there with me. And she said, "What's the matter, Mama?" I said, "I am healed." She said, and I couldn't walk. So I went to the hospital the next day to find out about my CAT scan. And the doctor asked me how I felt. And I told him I feel fine. I got a new doctor. He said, "Who?" I said, "Dr. Jesus." And then I told him, "I don't have any more nodules in my lungs." He said, "How you know before me?" I said, "I knew last night. Jesus told me so."
And he did a new test, and what did he find?
Nothing. Nothing.
My father had passed away like a year and a half or so ago before this happened. And I just couldn't lose my mother, and I prayed for her. And all I wanted was for her to come home. And I got much more, than I prayed for.
You noticed a difference after this?
She couldn't walk to the bathroom. She couldn't stand up by herself. Now she takes me to 3 grocery stores.
God bless you. And I understand you're running in a marathon this Thursday, isn't that right? Anne-Marie, what does it feel like to heal someone? You healed this woman. What happened?
Well, I think the important thing is that I didn't heal her. I said, I'm not...
You were the conduit.
Right. I'm his live wire.
Well, tell us what it's like to be a conduit.
It's the most rewarding and the most painful thing of my whole life.
Painful?
Yes.
Why?
I see suffering and dying people and children all day long, every day. It's very hard because the human side of me gets in the way. And Abbott is there always to remind me that the prayer should be, "Thy will, not mine."
Mary, what...
Very humbling.
At the end of it all, what did the doctor say about what happened to you?
They don't know. I just told them that Jesus did it.
Do you feel anything yourself when you're...
Yes. There has been some discussion about my being tested very soon because I have abnormal body temperatures, but my hands, heat comes through my head, down through my chest and out through my arms, and my hands become like hot irons. Mary, what does it feel like to you?
Yeah. It felt like electricity went all over my body. And she feels just as hot as she can be when she put her hands on me.
An actual physical sensation.
Patrick, as a pharmacist, do you believe that this was a miracle indeed?
Well, I prayed for my mother, and like I said before, I didn't expect. What I asked for was exceeded. Yeah, I think it was a miracle.
Mary, why do you think God gave you more time?
I can't ask why he gave me more time. All I can say, I thank him.
And, Patrick?
I think I've got an answer to that for my mother. I'm 55 years old, and until last night, my mother has never slept over my house. The only time she ever came to my house, I had to trick her to tell her I was taking her to a new grocery store. But she came because she wanted to come here. And I said, "Mom, why do you want to come there?" I said, "You're going to kill yourself going 6,000 miles for what?" She said, "I owe it to God for what he's done to me."
I think what we need to understand is that as long as you have faith, anything can be done. I believe in all of that.
You can be healed if you just have faith. Visited by angels. Thanks for joining us. Nirvana, you had a remarkable story about your daughter. Tell us about it.
Yes. I had some visitations with my daughter prior to her conception, not just while my wife was pregnant and she was in the womb, but even prior to my wife's conception, I had visitations with my daughter. And what it consisted of was there was a period of time where I was doing a lot of work on the other side, for lack of a better word, where I was doing counseling work and talking with people who were dead. And
you were talking to people who were dead?
Yeah, people who were actually dead and were no longer in living bodies. And we were in conversations with one another, was sort of counseling, helping them make the transition from this side into the other side. And during the period of time that was taking place, I had a visitation from this other spirit. beautiful soul, very radiant, very light. And there was no particular problem that this soul was having other than she came to visit and have a good time. And when I asked what her name was, she said that her name was Irisna. And we had several visitations of that nature. And then after about the fourth visitation, she came and said that she wanted to be born into my family. And would I agree to have her born into my family? And I said, I would love to have you in my family as my daughter. And at that point, there were no longer any more visitations for several months. And in about February of 1980, the beginning of February, I had a visitation from three angels, three angelic beings. And what they said to me was that now was the time of conception. Now is the time for your daughter to be born. Don't worry about anything. Don't be concerned about everything. Everything is taken care of right now. All of the finances, the health, everything that you need is already taken care of. So I had a conversation with my wife the very next morning, and I told her that now was the time for conception, for us to get rid of our contraceptives and go on about the business of having another child. And within a week to a week and a half of that taking place, my wife was pregnant. And 9 months later, my daughter was born.
You say visitation, do you mean a dream?
You can call it a dream in that I was asleep. But there is a difference in the dream and the vision because it was very, very real, it was very palpable, and it was an experience that had a very lasting effect. And I was actually in communion and in conversation. And in fact, the conversations that I had with my daughter were of such a nature that we really didn't talk in terms of the moving of lips. It was more of a communion, more of a telepathy, more of a communication of a mind meld.
You're obviously a very spiritual man, but it's not lost on you how this sounds to a lot of people.
Yes, I know it sounds very
come on.
strange.
I was talking to the dead one day, and then I had this. How do we access this? What are we to make of this? It's just a dream or a hallucination. What are you talking about? How do you convey the power of what this is?
I think the power is conveyed in things of the realness of, for example, like when my daughter was born. During the early portions of her year, she remembered the experiences of having talked to me on the other side. I look at things like the name Irisna, and anyone can go and try and look it up in any name books anywhere. There was the name that she had on the other side when we were having our conversations. I looked all over trying to find that name in name books, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And in my communion and communications with Spirit and asking, what does this mean? It was revealed to me that the name actually means she who sees as God sees. And even more so than any of that, there is a feeling, there is a passion that came with the connection. I mean, have dreams every night. We all have dreams every night. And all the dreams aren't dreams that I remember. And all of the dreams aren't dreams that have a lasting, profound effect upon my life. And all of the dreams don't result in a daughter being born into my family.
Sharon, you had a very different experience with angels. Tell us what happened with you.
My husband was killed in what was at that time the largest air disaster in history. And to say that I was in a despondent place was an understatement. He flew for a living, and he had a great fear of flying, and he felt that's how he was going to die. So we had an agreement that when he was going to make a long trip, I would accompany him. And I didn't this time. So not only did I feel the feeling of loss, but guilt as well. So as I was driving down a very steep hill that was slick with the first rain, there was a hairpin turn at the end of the curve. And as my car went down the hill, it failed to make the hairpin turn, and it began to slip off go straight out onto the cliff. And in that moment, I knew that it was all over. I mean, it happened so quickly, and it was so, there was no way back. I knew that that was the end of my life. And I had always had a belief in God and the protection that I had in God. So I just relinquished my life to that presence and said, literally, thy will be done. And when I did that, in the next moment, there was this huge angel that appeared, and I saw a white blur. My car was white as it repositioned itself back onto the road. And when I was able to pull over to the side, I sat there and shook for a very long time. And what I understood was that my life had meaning, and that it wasn't time for me to go. There was more for me to do. And it profoundly changed my life.
So where are you now?
Well, as a result of that experience, my life has taken a total different direction. It allowed me to ask the deeper questions: who am I? What am I doing here? And I've only taken action since then that have really brought out my joy, and to work with others to really use the time well rather than to waste it.
Have you had other experiences with angels?
Yes. I had an experience when I was on a very long drive to Mount Shasta to have really a spiritual retreat. And the drive was very long, and I was into probably about the 12th hour of it. And I was practicing something that I had been told, that if I held the state of mind of love and gratitude and just hold that continually, that I would automatically make contact with my guardian angel. So I did this for 12 hours as I was driving in the car. And as I approached the pine forests that surround Mount Shasta, all of a sudden this glorious presence of love came down and just enfolded me. It was like I had the arms of the beloved wrapped around me with this incredible love that was identified to me as my guardian angel. And that stayed with me for the entire weekend. And whenever I would get into my usual mode of, I better hurry up, I'm going to run out of time, and make my appointments, I would immediately be told to slow down so that you can be on time.
So you're calmer in the face of life?
Yes.
Are you afraid to fly? Are you afraid to fly?
No, I was never afraid to fly.
You never were?
Oh, yes, from the beginning.
Yeah.
But when I was able to calm down and to tune into that presence, what happened was it was like I was living a charmed life. I would meet the person that I was supposed to meet precisely the right time. The events that I was to connect with happened just like clockwork, and it was like I was being held, protected in the palm of God's hand during that time.
Yeah, this question's for the gentleman. I was wondering if your daughter, before conception, told you why she was coming into your family, what reasons she was picking the specific time to come through, or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And no, not really. Other than she wanted to come and she felt that she was to do some work and to be born. And I really never asked her precisely what it was she wanted to do.
When you were having these dreams, were they occurring on a nightly basis or every other night? How often were they occurring?
It wasn't every single night that I was having the dreams. And there were really about 4 times that I had visitations with her. 3 of them were actually in dreams, and one of them was actually during the time of meditation. And there was a visitation during that period of time. Over a period of, I guess, about a month and a half.
You said that the line of work that you did is a little strange. What is it that makes you different than those of us who can't speak with the dead or carry on a communication with the dead? I'm kind of curious,
The line of work?
Yeah.
I work in several positions. I work as a social worker, but I also do work as a spiritual therapist. And I do a lot of workshops on meditation and spiritual growth and development and things of that nature.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, if your daughter came to you before she was born, is she different now? Is she more spiritual than most children now?
Yes, she is. She is very connected. Although she no longer has any memory of the conversations that we had on the other side, her life is profoundly spiritual. She's very deeply involved in the church. She's very, very much into meditation, very much into God, very much into spirit, a very light soul.
Don't you feel that the overemphasis that has been placed recently on angels takes our mind off our Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ?
No, I really don't. Because in reality what happens is that's just one of a line of many, many experiences that I've had in life. And actually what all the experiences have done for me is to remind me of how deeply connected to God I am. That each and every one of us are sacred points of the divine, and we're places where God has an opportunity to play in the world. And so all these different experiences that I've had in life have really showed me that the common, average, everyday human being and the normal things that we go about the business of, that we have divine encounters all of the time.
But very few angels and even Jesus. Lorraine, I want to ask you a question. When you come back from an experience like this, and obviously you're a religious person, you're a very fervent person, but for people who are not religious, and they hear these stories that sound very difficult to understand or believe, what do you say to them?
St. Bernadette used to say, for those who do not believe, there are no words. For those who believe, there are no words necessary.
Yeah. Amen.
There's nothing more to say.
But the difficulty is that so many of these experiences are couched in religious language that if you are not already a part of that religious community, it's hard to enter in.
I guess with the graces that when your time is right, you know, when the student is ready, the teacher is given, and the time goes from there.
My question is for Anne-Marie. Does a person first have to be healed spiritually before they can be healed?
Yeah, interesting.
Physically?
Yeah.
I think that people have to be open and receptive to the Lord for there to be healing. In other words, they have to believe it's possible that God can do it.
Have you had some people who've come there, you know,
yeah,
set that they're not going to...
They will say to me, just do it, say your prayer very quickly, I haven't much time.
My question is for the gentleman in the purple. You said you worked with people that are on the other side, people that are dead. In the Bible, not to be disrespectful to you, but I'm religious also, and the Bible does talk about the dead being conscious of nothing at all. How do you explain that if you're talking with people that are from the other side? If they're not conscious of anything, how are you communicating with them? Do you think maybe it's another source?
I don't know how to answer that, other than I know that these were people that were no longer in a body, and it felt like they were like in a middle space, trying to transition from this world into another world, into the other dimension, and were kind of like stuck for a moment. And the role that I was playing with them was to help get them unstuck and help usher them to the next side.
Okay, I was just wondering, do you have to be of a specific faith to go get healed in Georgia or France, or could it be of various religious beliefs?
We find people coming from all different kinds of faiths to the Abbey to be healed. So Baptist, guy from Nigeria.
Christian, are they mostly Christian though, Abbott?
Not all of them.
Not all of them, no.
Even at Lourdes, there's people that have been documented as healed, and they came because someone with them was Catholic or faithful, and they weren't, and yet they received the healing.
Mm-hmm.
My question is for Sharon. Obviously, your husband died before your experience with an angel. Did you ever have the feeling that that angel was your husband, giving you some sign about the catastrophe that was to happen?
I didn't. I think that it was a different presence than my husband, who did appear to me in many times after that in dreams. This was a huge being of great, great light. And as wonderful as my husband was, I never knew him like that.
I have a question for all of you. Do you consider yourself as perfect?
No. What did you think the answer was going to be to that?
Well, I mean, you know, if you can heal and you can talk to the dead and you can do all these other things, only perfect people that I know, they can do all that. So that was my comment.
No one here heals to begin with. No one here heals.
Yeah, they've made that clear.
Only Jesus heals.
Yeah.
He's the divine physician.
And one of the things I would like to add on that is, as I was saying before, my feeling is that all of us have the ability to be in touch with wondrous miracles all of the time, every day in our life. It's just that most of us go around keeping ourselves closed off to the possibilities of that. We don't believe in the miraculous, and therefore we find ourselves living a life that doesn't afford miracles to take place all of the time.
My question is for the gentleman in the middle. You said at the beginning that you talk to the dead, trying to convince them that they're dead. How do you do that?
Oh, I don't know that I was trying to convince them that I was dead, that they were dead.
Yep. But Phil, you know, I got some bad news for you, pal. You're gone.
Question for the gentleman in the purple. I thought it fascinating that you had a dream with your daughter before even conception. Do you feel, do you believe in reincarnation and that souls exist before birth as well as after birth?
Yes, I do. I believe that souls exist before birth and after birth, and that we live in various lives, various planes.
You all have said that these healings you feel is from a Jesus or a very religious. Does anyone have an inkling that it's not from a religious source or some sort of metaphysical other source of divine healing besides Jesus? Does anyone feel that?
Healing can only come from God. It can't come from anyone or anything else.
Have you had any other experiences similar to that with your daughter?
Yes. A lot of different kind of experiences all of the time. A lot of very metaphysical experiences, a lot of experiences with other spirits and other souls. Encounters with my father since his passing, since his death, where I've had many visitations with him.
My question was for you. What's your name?
Nirvana.
Nirvana. I want to know, do you know how to discern whether the spirit that you saw, if it's Bible-based?
Yeah, is it Bible-based for you, Nirvana?
I don't know what Bible-based means.
Well, that's right. You see,
I don't know. Bible means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
It's not Bible-based.
I read the Bible all the time.
Okay.
But when you ask a question, if it's Bible-based, I don't really know what you mean by is it Bible-based.
The point is that people have trouble that if their perspective is biblical, then there's no reality outside the biblical. Right. Abbott, what do you say to people who are caring, loving people who hear this framed and it must be down the narrow path of the Bible and Jesus? I mean, I'm comfortable with that. That's where I am. I'm a minister. But there are people out there saying, how do I access this? Jesus is not where I am. How do we deal with this?
Well, I think God is bigger than any of us. And Jesus is important for me. It's a connection too. But what is your idea of God could vary from person to person. I think there are many different ways, but Jesus is really the way.
Yeah. I'm beginning to get the impression that those people who are healed because of faith. Now, for those people who are not healed, is there any advice that you could give as to how we could acquire such faith in getting healed?
Yeah.
But can I answer that a second here? It's not the amount of faith that you have or the depth of faith that you have. It's just something that our Lord chooses at that time. I myself did not have faith in God or in Mary. I merely had faith in my mother. Mom's going to take care of me and whatever it is it's going to be. I mean, I didn't want to go to church and do all that stuff. I was 14 years old and I was a rebellious teenager. So if it was based on faith, I would not be here right now.
Sort of puts you in a difficult situation. You know, if you need faith to be healed, but then you can't get faith except if it's given to you.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not the measuring factor.
Yeah. We'll be right back with more. Today's guests say they all had extraordinary experiences that completely changed their lives. For them, these events were very real, and they attribute them to their powerful faith. Thanks for joining us on The Other Side. Here's a preview of our next show.
I married a psychic. Being in love can be hard enough. But what if your partner can read your every thought?
My own mind is not my own.
Could you handle a relationship with no privacy and no secrets?
I can dig till I find it.
But there can be an upside, too.
Our love life is much better.
But is your psychic spouse manipulating you?
Usually I know what he's thinking. We know what men want.
I married a psychic.
That's next time on The Other Side. I'm Will Miller. So long.
Dr. Will Miller's Wardrobe, furnished by